Right, we're going to tackle Chapter 5, Book 5, The Grand Inquisitor. And I've got lots of notes because it was such a deep chapter. I was a wee bit nervous, to be honest, about getting to it because I knew it was a deep chapter. I've read this book before, as you probably know. I remember very little about it, but I do remember that there was a Grand Inquisitor chapter and that it was very important. So, yeah, I had the good fortune of reading this in Carnegie Library in Ayr. I had to go over to the mainland with my van to take it for repairs. And so I went and sat in the library. A library I hadn't been in for over 30 years. I can't remember the last time, but certainly it would have been when I was perhaps at Ayr Academy doing my hires, or when I was a student at St Andrews, so somewhere between 1991 and 1998. Either way, it was a long time ago. I didn't film any B-roll. I always forget to do that. I need to get better at doing that, otherwise I would include it. I'll put a wee photo in. I did take a selfie to send to my wife. So, a couple of photos for you. Let's take a look at the Grand Inquisitor. So remember we left Ivan and Alyosha in a tavern. So if you're watching my vlog, that's where we left it in the previous chapter. I'm doing this one as a standalone just because I think it's too long to include in the vlog. And I think it would sit better as a standalone chapter review because it's just so important. And I'm going to be reading out a lot of quotations because I've written a lot of quotations. And that's how I have been helping myself understand what I'm reading. So, yeah, let's break it down. Ivan explains to Alyosha, or he tells him a story, or a poem. Is it a poem? I think he says he's written a poem, but it's not really a poem. It's a story about Jesus coming back to earth, basically. The second coming after 15 centuries since his crucifixion and resurrection. And it talks of the Virgin Mary. And it's talking about forgiveness. So remember we discussed forgiveness. If you've watched the vlog, I keep referring back to myself here, forgetting this is a standalone. We discussed forgiveness in the previous chapter when the idea came up that there's lots of cruelty to children happening in the previous chapter. This is Ivan again, talking to Alyosha. And let's say, for example, a child is beaten or killed. Would the mother of the child be able to forgive the murderer or the perpetrator of the violence? That's what they're talking about with forgiveness. And that's what this is talking about here. It's the idea that the Virgin Mary sees sinners in a lake of fire in hell, and she pleads to God to forgive them. And God says, how can I forgive them? And he shows her the wounds in his son's hands and feet. So these are the perpetrators of the violence against Jesus, and how can that be forgiven? And so she recruits the angels and the archangels and the martyrs and pleads again with God to forgive them. So God relents and he grants them freedom from their torture from Good Friday to Pentecost. I don't know how long that is because I didn't look it up, but I imagine it's not very long. And that's his what's the word? Well, that's his forgiveness of these evildoers. And he then goes on to talk about the coming of Jesus, basically, in Seville during the time of the Inquisition. And there's a big long scene where he talks about what Jesus is doing and how he's recognised and people are worshipping him, and he's he saves a young deceased child, resurrects her, and then the Grand Inquisitor comes along, the Cardinal. He's 90 years old, and he orders the Jesus 2.0 to be seized, captured. He's been busy burning heretics at the stake, and he captures Jesus 2.0, puts him in a cell, and then goes down to talk to him the next day. And that's what most of the chapter's about. I wouldn't say it's a conversation, because Jesus doesn't say anything. It's just the Inquisitor talking. So what does he talk about? Quite a lot. So I'll go through my notes here with you. It's true, he laughed again, that the old man is 90 and his idea could long ago have driven him mad. So at this point it talks about the idea, and it's capitalised in the Avsey translation. Seemingly, according to the notes at the back of the book, it's not capitalised in the Russian, and I'm not sure about the other translations. I've written a note here, compare with other editions, and I haven't done that. But it talks of Paradise Lost by Milton in the notes at the back, and refers to this idea with a capital I. Idea. In the original Russian text, this word is not capitalised, and its use is rather obscure. Cf. This new created world, how good, how fair, answering his great idea. From Milton, Paradise Lost, 7557. Idea is capitalised in Richard Bentley's London edition of 1732 and in the OED. All the editions of Paradise Lost after 1735 that I consulted print idea without an initial capital. And it says that the whole time the prisoner is silent. It's like the fundamental principle of Catholicism. The Pope is responsible for everything, so there's no need for you to return at all. Don't disturb us, at least not until the appointed hour. So this is what the Grand Inquisitor says to Jesus. And didn't you yourself say so often, I want to make you free? So it's really all about freedom. That's what this whole discussion's about. And the Inquisitor's saying that man can't cope with freedom. Man needs to be subjugated. And that's what his role is as the Grand Inquisitor, to subjugate man so that they can be free within constraints. So let's see what that looks like. The Grand Inquisitor claims that man laid this freedom to the clergy so that they can be happy. So they've given away the freedom in order to be ruled so that they can be happy. Interesting. For only now has it become possible to contemplate human happiness for the first time. Man was created a rebel. Surely rebels cannot be happy, can they? So again, we're speaking about the Inquisition. There's a long bit now about the 3 temptations in the Bible. So this will be when Jesus was out in the wilderness and the devil tempted him 3 times. So all the wise men in the world could not conceive of 3 such powerful temptations. For those 3 temptations combine and predict, as it were, the whole future history of mankind, and manifest 3 images in which all the insoluble historical contradictions of human nature the world over will come together. That's quite deep. So the devil's temptations apparently were a miracle. For nothing has ever been so intolerable to man and to human society as freedom. Oh, really? So long as they remain free, no science will ever give them bread, and in the end they will bring their freedom and lay it at our feet, saying, enslave us, but feed us. So the first temptation is all about the bread of heaven versus the bread of earth. Jesus is starving, and I mean, I don't know the Bible that well, But I'm guessing that Jesus at this stage was offered by the devil some food, whether it be bread or a banquet. I don't know. But he rejected that in favour of the bread of heaven. So his God, or his Father rather, not his God. But we shall tell them that we obey you and rule in your name. We shall be deceiving them again, because we shall no longer let you need us. So the Inquisitor's saying, yeah, we're going to tell mankind that we are subjugating them in your name, but we're not. So, when man finds himself free, there is no concern more pressing and more tormenting to him than the desire immediately to seek out someone to worship. So man can't handle being free without constraints. We're back there again. And he says, you rejected the one absolute banner that was offered to you to make all men worship you uniquely, the banner of earthly bread. And you rejected it in the name of freedom and the bread of heaven. So we've discussed that. Jesus could have accepted the offer of sustenance, and then what? Then recruited mankind under his banner to unite them as one. I think that's what it's saying. Without a firm conviction of the purpose of living, man will not consent to live and will destroy himself rather than remain on earth, though he be surrounded by bread. What? So I've put here that actually sounds kind of true. I've taken that to mean that meaning and purpose are vital, and that without that, though you be surrounded by luxury, let's say, or even just food, enough, you're not going to be happy. So, yeah, interesting. Had you forgotten that peace and even death are dearer to man than freedom of choice and the knowledge of good and evil? Yeah, that kind of rings true as well. Peace and even death are dearer to man. So if we had freedom of choice and the knowledge of good and evil, not quite sure what that's saying, to be honest. I guess I've written it down because it seemed important or interesting, but I'm not sure what it's saying. You desired man to have freedom of choice and love so that he would follow you freely, lured and captivated by you. But it didn't occur to you that in the end, men would reject and dispute even your image and your truth if they were saddled with such a terrible burden as freedom of choice. So is that referring back to freedom of choice and the knowledge of good and evil? Or is it saying that man needs that choice to be taken away in order to be happy? He needs to be told what to believe. And it gets us into faith as well. That comes up a little bit later. The idea that faith, if there were proof that God existed, then there would be no need for faith. And faith is important for mankind's happiness. See, it's deep in it. There are only three forces on earth that can subdue and imprison the conscience of these weak-willed rebels forever for their own good. These forces are miracle, mystery, and authority. You rejected all three, and thus you yourself set the example. You thirsted for a faith that was free and not inspired by miracles. You thirsted for love freely given and not the slavish gratitude of the captive before the mighty power that has terrified him for all time. So, yeah, Jesus is looking for love without coercion, is what it's saying here, I think. Love that's freely given and not love of a slave for his master, which kind of agree with. We are not with you, but with him. That is our secret. We accepted Rome and the sword of Caesar from him, and we proclaimed ourselves the only kings on earth. Right, so this is about power, subjugation and terror. Terror with the Inquisition and the burning of heretics. And that leads to man's happiness, does it? I'm going to say no to that. The need for universal unity is mankind's third and last torment. So yeah, man does not stand alone. We need togetherness. But that comes through love, does it not? And Jesus unified his disciples and his followers and those who became Christian, but not the whole world. And it does talk in this section about the few versus the many, and that it was the few that worshipped him and gave their love freely versus the many that did not. But we shall withhold the secret, and to keep them happy, we shall opiate them with promises of eternal reward in heaven. So, lies again. But lies that cannot be proved or disproved. And so, for those who are suffering on earth, they could be made to do anything for the promise of eternal reward in heaven. But don't we get that through accepting Jesus into our hearts? Certainly what Christians believe. Is it the case that if you were oppressed by an inquisitor and told that you'd have to do as you're told, basically, and then your reward, so you have to suffer for the glory and the power of the hierarchy? Don't know about that. And this is all 1881, this was written. So long before communism was a thing. Just putting that out there. So that's really the Inquisitor's chat to Jesus, and Jesus doesn't respond, and the Inquisitor asks him for a response. And Jesus gets up and kisses him on the lips, and that's it. Doesn't say anything. So Alyosha then counters Ivan's story and says, your suffering Inquisitor is just a fantasy. Your Inquisitor doesn't believe in God. That's all there is to his secret. Which, you know, does seem to be the case. And then Ivan goes back to talking about what he talked about in the previous chapter about drinking from the cup of life until he's 30 and then dashing it to the floor. So I'm not sure what that's supposed to signify. But then he says he can avoid debauchery and degradation until then, until he's 30. And then what? And Alyosha says, how will you do that? He says, I'll do it in the Karamazov way. And so Alyosha says, what, you mean everything is permitted? This is a phrase that's come up before. It's a deeply philosophical idea that if everything is permitted, then I suppose man has freedom of choice in the knowledge of good and evil. And it's one's own choice whether one acts in a good way or in an evil way. So Alyosha says that. Ivan says, I will not reject the maxim, everything is permitted. So, well then, for that, you will reject me, won't you? He says to his brother Alyosha, and Alyosha responds by kissing him on the lips. To which Ivan shouts out, plagiarism! But it's quite a nice little touch, I thought. So there we go, that's the end of the chapter. And Ivan leaves, and then Alyosha's like, I wonder if I'll ever see him again. Will he? I don't know. But yeah, it's quite clear that I really don't have a deep understanding of this chapter. There's so much in it. I don't know. If you understand it better than me, let me know. Tell me what you think of it. I'd be keen to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching this one. See you in the next one.